Welcome everybody to Alludo PD Innovations. This is our second webinar in a series. Today, this afternoon, evening, depending on what coast you're on, we are focusing on students in action. I'm going to take a minute and introduce our panelists, our guests for today. First, we have Vanessa Waxman. Vanessa is the Curriculum and Instruction Technology Integration Coach at Rockaway Township School District in New Jersey, East Coasters. Vanessa's taught for 15 years, working with teachers and staff to support the effective integration of technology with new and existing curricula. She's a graduate of the College of New Jersey and continued her passion for knowledge and received her master's degree in education with a focus on special ed and supervision, and pushed on to earn a postgraduate certificate in learning technologies. So thank you, Vanessa, for joining us. Also from East Coast and Rockaway is Patrick Higgins. He's the assistant superintendent. Patrick's been a teacher of English and social studies, a tech coordinator, and an administrator of various schools in New Jersey. His current position is as assistant superintendent at Rockaway. He focuses on developing curriculum to meet the needs of today's students, coordinating professional development opportunities for teachers and administrators, along with facilitating change through innovative programs. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, we have Jay on the West Coast. Nice background there, the sunset. Jay's the coordinator of education technology for the Oxnard Union High School District. He currently manages the Alludo program for Oxnard, which is Oxnard Union Express, and it's designed for teacher professional development. He's also launching Smarter Things, which is a program designed for the high school students. We've had the privilege of working with Jay, not only at Oxnard Union, but also at Rio School District, where he was a TOSA, as well as elementary and middle school teacher. So welcome, Jay. Glad to have you here. And also with us is Damon Torgerson, co-founder of Alludo, the product Alludo, and Alpen Spruce, and I'm Julia Francis. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of our customers across the country. And today I'm really excited. Our first webinar is we feature and senior teachers that we're going to do. So many of you that might know Alludo may know that our platform was originally developed for teacher PD, but soon thereafter we had districts that said, hey, this is great. Can we look at this for our students? And so tonight we're going to focus not so much on the Alludo platform, but more so what does it mean to provide programs for students. We've heard a lot about choice and voice for students and personalized learning. So the first question I'm going to throw out there, and I'm going to start with you, Vanessa, is when you think about choice and voice, personalized learning for your students, what does that mean to you and to the students at Rockaway?
So for me, it's one of those things where you like the old school teaching where you say, here are your three choices, pick one of the three. Our kids now are so much more advanced that they have to find things that they actually understand in the way that they process. So for me, having students pick their own options is more than three choices. It would be more like a choice board of say 5 to 8. So that you touch all over their learning style. So you might have someone who does more hands-on learning. You might have someone who does more like the old school rote skills. But the importance of having that choice allows students to be who they are and share what they've learned and what they're interested in their own way. So that's where that line kind of comes in, but that's the focus of it for me.
That's great, thank you. So Jay, from a high school student perspective, when you think of choice and voice for your students, what does that mean to you?
Well, so I think a huge part of providing voice and choice in the classroom is with engagement, but also we try and provide voice to students in, what's happening in their schools. I've worked on some initiatives in our district, giving student voice through like a Twitter chat and other platforms that we've used to be able to give students to give input on what's going on. And I think that helps them feel like, they're sort of a part of the community and having some say. As far as in the classroom, it just helps with engagement and allows them to work on things with their strengths and things that they're interested in.
Absolutely. So Patrick, as an educator and as a leader in your school district, how do you approach implementing a student choice and personalized learning type of a program in your district?
So if I were looking at that first question that you had asked everybody, and I think it leads into this one too, I look at choice as a way for kids to see relevance in what you're doing. A lot of times, like Vanessa said, if you lay out choices for your kids, you say, okay, do one of these three things. There really isn't relevance. It's someone's doing something to you, like the learning is happening to you. When we add elements of voice and choice to what students do, the learning starts happening for them because it takes them to a new place that they want to get to, or it takes them on a path that they maybe have some independence on. So when we talk about implementing a personalized approach here, we're just in the infancy of it, but I think we're starting to see, this switch to hybrid and virtual that we had to undergo over the last 6 or 7 months. I think it's allowed our teachers to see that there are many different ways to do this. There is obviously the traditional way of being face-to-face with students, but their teachers are now problem solving and coming up with multiple ways for kids to show that they understand and that they know how to do something, or that it can lead to something. So we've started with, our first game in Ludo was the election game, and it just kind of exploded because we saw, oh my gosh, like kids really want to move through things at their own pace, and they want to move through things when they want to. And that's kind of opened our eyes to what we might do going forward. We have so many different things that we can, gamify, if that's the right word. Things like when Vanessa and I were creating the game, we kept throwing in things that nobody wanted to teach. Like nobody wants to teach kids how to format a Google Doc with bullets or indent or anything like that. Like that's really boring stuff. But if you put it into a platform where the kids really want to do it, they want to get through something and they want to learn something, dropping that stuff in there to help them get there, like kids will do it. And I think that's been a revelation for us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Jay touched on it too. It's interesting from a psychology perspective when you put something out there and say, this is for you to choose whatever you want to do, versus putting it at them, as you say. It's received in such a different way. It's not as boring when you get to go, oh, I'm going to pick which one I want to do instead of someone forcing me and telling me what I need to do, right? So Jay, maybe you can speak to it a little bit. As you go down the path of more choice for your teachers, for your students, how are you preparing your teachers at Oxnard to deliver instruction in a different way?
Yeah, I think the key for us has been, the teachers having the firsthand experience of personalized learning and gamification by being in our teacher PD game. So the teachers have been able to play our Oxnard Union Express game and as a learner and experience what it's like, having choice and, either choice in what activities you're doing or choice in how you're demonstrating your learning. And I think it's really helped them. I think that experience has really helped them in the switch to distance learning as well, because it sort of gave them a fresh way of looking at how they might be able to do distance learning and teaching in their classrooms. So I think them experiencing it as the learner kind of helped them to see how they could then develop things for their own students to experience as a learner.
That's great. And then Patrick and Vanessa, same question to you. When you rolled out the election game for your fifth graders, this is obviously a program that's for a discrete group, and you only have a certain number of teachers. But if you look more broadly across the program, district-wide, there's probably other ways that you're doing choice for your student and personalized learning. How are you equipping your teachers, or how are they able to make that transition to see the benefit of choice for their students?
Vanessa, I'll jump in on this one real quick. So they are, I think, traditionally, if if we look, education, it always works in cycles and things like that. And so, trends years ago, project-based learning and, that kind of piece that's been around for a while. And so our teachers are familiar with project-based learning. One of the people I used to work with used to have a joke though, like, if the project's not meaningful and it's not relevant to what they're doing, there's no real point in doing the project. She used to say, you know, like the biggest one she said was read a book, make a kite. You know, there was no attachment between the kite and the book. So like you have to make that project relevant. So our teachers have a background in project-based learning and problem-based learning. So that's kind of helped with a lot of this. And I think your point too, and Jay's point about the move to distance learning let teachers experience in terms of like when they had to learn how to use some of the systems that we were using or some of the methodologies that we were using, they had to become distance learners. So it really did shape their mindset around, oh my gosh, like I have to still be relevant. I have to still be meaningful and engaging, even though I'm in a digital environment. So our teachers do have a background with it, but I like, in looking at some of the things we've seen in the Ludo, developing that even more, like expanding their mind to see what else is out there that they could possibly employ with their students.
Great. So Vanessa, question to you. And Patrick, you mentioned the project-based learning and what have you from a topic standpoint, but when you think about choice for your students, is there a particular type of curriculum or subject matter that you think lends itself more to having choice for students that you can present, similar to what you did with history in the election game, or there are topics that are more challenging? I'm looking for you from an expertise standpoint for our audience to say, well, we've tried it with maybe this type of subject and it works well versus others might not be as easy to do.
So that's a good question. So I think when we first started this and kind of came into the idea of using a Ludo, we had started talking about badging first. And that built us up into this platform, not really knowing where it was really going to go. I don't think, because we did start with the idea of teacher PD. And then a teacher approached me and she said to me, you know, Vanessa, I don't want to teach the election. The group of us don't really know how to teach the election without controversy. And they were very concerned about, and that's what started us on this path. As we started talking with some of those teachers, it was a conversation of, you know what, we don't teach grammar anymore. Like it's not a separate curriculum anymore. We don't have a grammar book that we used to use, all these kind of things. And we were like, oh, we can make a grammar game. And then I was talking to, so I have notebooks all over the place. And I was talking to another teacher and I was talking to her about history in the middle school. And we were saying, well, how can we make this work in the middle school? Because certain subjects, as you said, do lend itself a little easier than others. Whereas like, you know, for example, music might be a little trickier because if you're teaching chords and progressions, you need to have certain skill sets before you can get to others. And you can't really choose because if you don't know like C major, how can you go to like C minor or something to that effect? But I do think that within every subject area, at least for us, when we look at our curricula, there's a lot of options because you can take it in a different direction. So for music, we might talk about composers. So instead of making our composer unit, you know, a video, listening, reading a novel, reading an excerpt, you know, whatever it is, we can make that more of a choice game where they can explore 5 composers from 5 different time periods, right? Or in art, they could do the same thing. Our art curriculum for us is written on a timeline. So in each grade level, they hit a different time period. And so you might see like more like Egyptian art, and another year you might see more modern art. And so you could easily streamline a lot of this choice. And even for us, like this Alludo platform for them to be able to engage in the curriculum. So I think you just think outside the box, and that's the key, is how can I change what I'm doing to make it, as you know, Patrick and Jay were saying, more engaging. And I think too, the part of it about, you know, having your teachers learn as you're going. I think a lot of our districts are teaching hybrid of some capacity. There's a lot of closed districts, but there's a lot of hybrid. And I think giving your kids the choice and having it in a place like this takes some stress off the teacher, right? Because you've got kids doing so many different things. So if you just think outside the box a little bit of your curriculum and your daily lesson structure, that's a good way to kind of look at how it would work for you.
That's a great point, Vanessa, too, because that was one of the things I noticed early on when we launched the game for teachers, the stress level in terms of not just teaching the election, but like our Mondays are are fully virtual. All of our kids are home on Mondays. And this was something that the teachers could assign the students to do on that Monday that they didn't really have to think about. They could like outsource social studies for a little bit. Obviously they would answer the individual questions. They would, work on things with kids as they came up, but it was something that they could like, okay, that's happening over there. I can focus on this for a little bit, and that's something in this, in the pandemic that we're dealing with, the stress level on teachers, we had to really be careful about capacity. And that's one thing I think I saw in our teachers, that they were like, okay, I can breathe while they're doing this. So that was good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's something that we're hearing all across the country. Teachers are stressed, they're overloaded, and it's nice to see that that's been a benefit for them. So Jay, same question to you in terms of, and again, from a high school district perspective, what kind of curriculum and topic and subject matters do you see working for choice versus maybe some that not so good?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be maybe more challenging in like the core classes, and maybe it lends itself a little better to like, some CTE courses and things like that. I know when, as you mentioned, back when I was with Rio, before we started our first game, the Rio Paddle game for teachers, I was teaching a middle school computer class, and I had played around with some different ways of doing gamification because I was kind of interested in it. It seemed like it might be something that would be fun, but it never really made sense for me as far as how to implement it. And then one day I got an idea of how I wanted to gamify my classroom, inspired by a Kung Fu movie. And it all made sense to me, and I set it up, and it worked. And the students, it worked well for the students, and it kind of changed how I taught to more of a personalized learning, where I was not up front doing direct instruction all the time, but I was doing that once in a while and supporting them. But my whole point of that is, I think it can be challenging for any subject until it makes sense, until you can visualize it. So I think, in a math class, actually this summer, we had a teacher that ran her whole summer school distance learning math class, algebra class, using a Ludo. She built a student game. I helped her a little bit, but it was mostly her designing. And the focus was then just on these products that the students were going to turn in. So the focus wasn't on, page 53, 1 through 35 odd, there was still that practice piece, but then the game was set up where they would do these projects or record this video or whatever, that was then turned in a Ludo. So I think it can work. We also currently have a culinary arts class that, they're creating their recipe or making a video or a blog post or something, and that kind of thing is what's turned in their Ludo game. So again, I think it can work in just about any subject, but it's a matter of sort of being able to visualize what that might look like in your content area.
Julia, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Oh, so Jay, 2 questions. First, can you share that algebra? We'd love to see that. We have a summer school algebra program here and a pre-algebra program that we would love to see. That's the first question. Second is, what Kung Fu movie?
Those are easy questions.
Yes, we're willing to share. Well, I can show you. The teacher was using a specific curriculum that went with that, but yes. And the Kung Fu movie was. It has multiple translated names: Master Killer or the 36 Chambers of Shaolin. So basically, the guy. Bad people came to his village, and so he decided he wanted to learn Kung Fu to fight back. So he went to Shaolin, and he had to go through these 35 chambers, and so the students had to do that in the class as well.
That's very cool.
Awesome.
And then the 36th chamber is one that he adds at the end, and the 36th chamber for the students was they got to create their own projects, so that they had more choice built into it.
Nice. I like that.
Very nice. Well, so appreciate you sharing all of this, because it's great to hear what's working and some areas where it might be more challenging. But when you think about the success of a program, whether it's the programs, the algebra or the election day within the Ludo platform, or outside of that, what your teachers are doing and different tools and platforms that they're using for choice, how as educators and leaders in your district do you measure this program is working, choice is effective? This is something we want to continue to do. So I'm going to start with you, Vanessa.
So I think, I can speak to the teachers and how teachers would gauge something being effective or not. I think when you're, especially in this environment right now, the amount of engagement you're getting from your kids. So are you getting feedback from them? Are they actually progressing through it? Whether it's a Ludo or a choice board or not, how often do you have to hound your kids to get the work done versus not? I think is a really good gauge for a teacher to figure out if the choice options or the direction that they're going is working. In terms of a district, that's a little bit trickier. I might default to Patrick on that one, because we don't give choice assessments. We don't give, you get to pick to take this test today or you don't, but hopefully by doing your choice activities, you're going to demonstrate on an assessment that you understand the content. To that capacity, I really though think that a lot of it is if you're as a teacher, you don't have to ask them 20 times, you don't have to remind them 15 times to turn something in. That's how you know it's an effective strategy and tool to continue to use.
Yeah, great points. Patrick, how about you?
So I obviously, as being in the role I'm in, I'm always kind of looking at data, and so we're looking, what does the data tell us about this? And I can see someone in the chat had asked about learning loss and things like that. So what I'm focused on when I look at these things, for right now, I would look at what we're doing inside of a Ludo and any kind of interaction, and I would kind of really agree with Vanessa in that right now I'm looking at engagement. Are kids engaged in what they're doing? And I think as you get into that, and I was just, while Vanessa was talking, I was looking at some of the achievements that are coming through, and that's where you're really going to see, are the kids, are like the things that you're asking, are they grasping it? Like, are they comprehending what you're asking? Are they doing the right things? Are they thinking about the right things based upon what you're giving them? So in terms of that, I think looking at those achievement levels and seeing that's where we're getting the information about whether kids are doing well or not. The overall picture, though, I think when you're allowing kids, and I'm a big believer in choice in just about everything. We're a reading workshop school district, so we allow our kids to choose the books that they read on a daily basis. So kids have a huge choice is a big part of our reading work as well. So, but I think in the larger picture, when you're allowing choice and you're letting kids have agency over what they're doing, the results you see on, whether it be a standardized assessment or we use universal screening tools in September, January, and June, that's where we'll really begin to see, are the decisions we're making in terms of things like a Ludo, are they allowing the kids to make progress? So those are the big tools that we use for that. With learning loss, right now it's a very funny time with learning loss, because we're seeing strange things. Like we're looking at our first graders as a whole, and you're seeing massive learning loss there because they missed the second half of kindergarten face-to-face. And that's a big deal. And so that's an explosive time for kids and learning. And so we're seeing learning loss there. And I think to answer Fatim's question, we are looking at what can we do to really, accelerate that first grade year, like what they're doing in first grade right now. And whether it be through choice things like this, or whether it be through, assessing exactly what they're missing and giving it to them. That's how we're addressing those pieces right now.
That's great. Thank you. So Jay, question to you, same question to you, but two parts. One is first, just measuring success, whether it be student engagement or other things that you're looking at on the data side. And then the second piece is as you are looking at different alternatives for choice instruction for your students, how does that tie in with state standards and compliance requirements that you have to align to and measure with, while you're also being creative and flexible in the instruction style?
Yeah, so data wise, so we're looking at student games soon to be at a district level. We're gonna have a district wide student game that I'll talk about. We have one school that has a school wide game. We have another school that has 3 different academies in their school, and each academy has a game, which is a game that spans the 4 years that they're in school in that academy. We have several schools this year. One school last year started a freshman house game. This year, because of distance learning and having freshmen coming in, possibly never even have stepped foot on campus, in an effort to help them sort of connect with their school and build that sense of community and also get to know, people and resources and things. We have freshman games across our district, and then we have some teachers doing class games. So a lot of different aspects and data to look at for those. So I think it's still early at my level to look at, the success of these, and sort of depending on the game, success looks different. The engagement is a huge part, obviously, seeing that students are in there active. If we're looking at a class game, eventually it will be, looking at, well, I taught this year exclusively running my class through a Ludo, and, gamification and personalized learning and competency-based learning. And, instead it probably is totally changing how you're teaching, right? And so then I think we'll be able to look at some of those assessments later on to see how that goes. For the district-wide game, part of the focus is like digital citizenship, so we'll be able to see, how much of that students completed. It has been cool to look at on the teacher side of things, on the PD game, seeing how much time teachers are spending, that they're going in and completing these activities and earning these badges and learning all these new things. It's cool to look at the time spent and points earned and badges earned and that kind of stuff. But on the student side of the games, I think it's still early, and we're going to sort of look at it in different ways. Your second question was, you're looking at, are you focusing on standards and things? That's really what I love about the idea of running a class through a Ludo, is because in our district, we're having we've been focused on equity, but we're specifically looking at grading and equity. And we're trying to change some of our grading practices. And what I love about the idea of running a whole class through a Ludo is it really does focus on those standards or those competency-based, things that you're focused on. And it gets rid of just that assignment vomit of you're just throwing one assignment after another at students, and they're trying to keep up and they don't know what's coming. And, it's like, here are the things we're going to focus on. It's really transparent. Here's what the class is. On the teacher end, it's a lot more work on the front end, because you got to build out the whole year or however long your term is that you're doing it. But students know exactly what's expected. It's focused on them reaching mastery. And it's just, it's a lot cleaner. So that's something that really excites me about the idea of setting up these games in a Ludo for students, for classes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Very exciting.
Very cool.
So you've touched on it. Well, one thing I want to mention is we've got a great audience of people who have joined us. So for those of you that are in the audience, please feel free to add a question in the chat, or if you want to comment on anything or add to the discussion, please let us know. We'd love to have your participation. You touched on it a little bit earlier, Patrick, when you were talking about distance learning and how with distance learning, it's opened up, I think, your teacher's eyes to different ways of doing things. I want to go just a little bit deeper in that. When it comes to, again, choice, how are your teachers, how's your district leveraging technology and the opportunity that we have in distance learning to offer and provide more choice to your students?
I think just by nature of things like the technological gap that you have in a district like ours, where we have a wide range of socioeconomic groups, just by the nature of the fact that you have to deal with kids that have everything, that there's 25 devices in their house, versus kids that have, mom has a cell phone. That whole process last spring when this started, that really opened up everyone's eyes to offering multiple methods for not even just creating content, but getting it to the kid, getting it back from the students. So we've really explored. I mean, if there was something that was free out there last year, somebody in our district was using it. And, Vanessa and I did a lot of cleanup this summer with, the accounts that people had created and the data that had been, splashed out there and things like that. We did a lot of cleanup with that. But I think what it showed everyone was that, and Vanessa and I joked about this a lot. We've both been in educational technology now for a good 10 years or so. And it feels like the last 10 years have been like practice, like we were scrimmaging for years. Like I probably have given like 200 Google Docs workshops, or, I've given Skype workshop, whatever it was. Like we gave those workshops and then it was never used. And now all of a sudden it was game time in March, like everybody was like, had to use these things. So I think it was nice to see for us that teachers were really able to leverage all these different tools that they had and lean on each other to find out what was working well. We had, even simple tools like Kami, which digitized PDFs and allowed kids to go back and forth with that, made so many teachers' lives and students' lives easy during this time. So I think, that's really opened up our eyes to the possibility of like, wow, we can really push further with this. Like we can put things in the hands of teachers and see what happens, because as much as we love this tool or we love that tool, to see how it's actually applied and used, you need someone that's a practitioner that's in the trenches doing that work. And so it was great for us to see the creativity that occurred from our staff.
That's great. And Vanessa, to that point, because you're like on the ground working with these teachers hands-on, do you have examples of things that the teachers are doing using technology in a different way that's been very successful with their students? Again, just from the lens of perspective of students having more opportunity for choice and supporting students across diversity and accessibility.
It's actually really interesting. So over the summer, the Bitmoji craze happened, right? Everyone has these Bitmoji classrooms and oh my gosh, they take forever to load. So if a kid's try to like open up a Google slide deck that a teacher created, there's like 1,000 items in there that are just lagging, right? So I have to tell you, like, first and foremost, that's what I see a lot of the choice boards coming from our teachers. A lot of them have gotten rid of the tic-tac-toe board, if you will, of like what we used to send home for like for spelling work, right? You would send home a spelling choice board and you would say, do your rainbow words, do your 3 times each, cut out and make a ransom letter with magazine letters and all that kind of stuff. I've seen a lot of transition in terms of technology being a more digitized experience. So it might be a Google slide and it'll say like, go to this room and pick like these 4 books or pick 2 books. And those kind of things I see a lot in the elementary. I have to tell you too, in our middle school, we're a K-8 district, there's a lot of the teachers using those Bitmoji classroom kind of experiences for their kids as well. And I think it's interesting because their choices have changed. So it might be create a video or use Flipgrid to, engage with another student or to share your perspective on this novel or this character, right? And then you might see the other side of it being, just comment on someone else's work. And I think what we're seeing a lot more of in terms of choice too is a lot of digital etiquette and digital citizenship built in without even realizing that they're teaching it. When you talk about responding to a peer, especially if you're using like Flipgrid or if you're making a comment within Google Classroom, I think there's a lot of that happening as well in terms of, are you choosing to engage this way or choosing to engage this way? Not even so much the activity, but just the platform. If they're having the choice of using like an Edpuzzle, or they're having a choice of using a Google slide deck or a Google Doc, old school typing, I'm seeing a lot of that. And it's interesting because as Patrick said, I mean, if I looked up my like resume of all the PDF ever taught in my life, I've taught the same things. I could do them with my eyes closed, right? Like this is how you open a calendar event, and this is how you do this, and this is how you format it. Like you can do it in your sleep. And I think there's a lot of teachers who might use some of these tools on a daily because administrators or co-teachers share it out, but they weren't always owning it themselves. And you're seeing a lot more owning, and then they're being creative in their own way. So like someone might want the Bitmoji classroom and it's just too much for them, but they made a Google drawing that had, 3 items for the kids to click on just because that was enough for them. So I think there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like we've seen this as a company over the past couple of years, our user base, our customers, clients, administrators of our platform have helped kind of push us and mature us into features and functionality and things that we might not even have dreamed up, because the users that are using our platform are sharing these ideas. Does it do this? And can we have it do this? Like Patrick, you said, hey, I want that algebra game. Well, now we have a feature where Jay can just share the algebra game, and we made that easy because of you. I feel like what you were sharing, Vanessa, is very similar in that you have students that are maturing the use of this technology, and the teachers are observing it. And a lot of it might be coming from choice, because the more opportunities you give them to pick from the different technologies and the use and what they do with it, the further they're going to go, which is exciting. So Jay, would you like to comment on that? Because you're seeing high schoolers, so I'm sure they're taking it to a completely different level.
Yeah, well, so first I'll say I've had multiple teachers that have come up to me, especially early on in distance learning, and they said, I have to say, because of Alludo, I feel like I'm ready for this. Like I'm ready for now, because they've been exposed to all these different tools and they've been experimenting with these different ones. So that was cool to hear. I think also, again, the exposure to, gamification, personalized learning, voice and choice and all that really helped them in sort of designing what they wanted their lessons to look like. When we first went into distance learning, we did like weekly assignments. We didn't have, any sort of daily requirement. So we did weekly assignments. And so teachers would assign something on a Monday. And so many teachers went to those choice boards or playlists or, virtual station rotation or something, but something that allowed for some voice and choice, and that really fit their environment at that time. It's been a little bit different in this fall semester that we've started, because there now is like a state requirement of some sort of daily live interaction. So it's not just like chunked in a week, but we still have teachers using a lot of those same types of things to provide choice to their students.
Got a question here. I've got a few questions, and just thought I'd bring one in here because I think it ties into equity, ties into choice. Nairi is asking, how are you managing culturally responsive teaching? How are you bringing that into your games or into your teaching practice in this time of distance learning and all those things that, again, kind of ties it a little bit into equity there?
So I'll say, yeah, we're still in the process of that. That's something we want to build into our teacher game directly. That's something that we're still working on at a district level, exactly what that's going to look like.
What are some of the challenges at the district level that it's obviously it can be a sensitive topic and those sorts of things, I'm assuming. What are some of the questions that you're wrestling with right now?
What does that look like? It's a big one. And as far as, what PD are we providing teachers that then they are then implementing in their classrooms with their students?
And I think for us too, we just last year in this district, maybe we were a little late to the party, but in terms of overall equity, we switched from a numbers-based and average-based grading system in K-5 to a standards-based grading system. And I think one of the changes that we saw with that was maybe not culturally responsive, but there was definitely more equity in how teachers looked and objectivity in how teachers looked at work. To what Jay was saying before too about front-loading standards into things like Alludo, or front-loading standards into what you're doing. It allowed our teachers to really see very clearly, at this point in the year, we expect kids to be at this point. And if they're not, this is very clearly what we need to do to get them there, and the types of grading that they could give. Whereas before, I always found like traditional grading systems were so odd in that, like, looking, like, let's say it's like our marking period ends next week, let's say. And so I have a D right now because my average of all the work I've done is a D. But like tomorrow I come in and I just knock it out of the park. Like I know this stuff now. Like I figured it out and now I've learned it. But my report card, like the grade you're going to give me is going to be a D because consistently I showed you I didn't know it, but now I do. So with standards-based grading, like for us, that was a big an equity switch for us. Like, and that allowed our kids to, and our teachers to see if a kid knows if the kids met the standard, it doesn't matter when they met the standard. They get the symbol that shows they've met that standard. So for us, equity in terms of that, that's really made the switch for us in our K-5.
That's really cool.
I want to add one thing to Nairi's question. So we actually recently applied for a grant based on that, and our whole grant focus was basically to put money into training for teachers that would all be done through Alludo. So whether we get the grant or not, we're kind of on hold on building it out in Alludo right now. But whether we get the grant or not, we still want to make that a part of the game where essentially teachers can then earn that equity badge or whatever it's called. But we're going to essentially build it into the game.
So stay tuned.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
And then
you'll
we'll
share
put it
all
in the
that wonderful
catalog for all of
content.
you to be able to take and use.
Yeah. And I did comment on that question as well in the chat. We have districts right now currently working with us that that's one of their top topics in their programs that they've been building out just recently. So we have maybe 3 or 4 districts that just rolled out in the last month or two, and they have an entire mission dedicated towards teaching with tolerance, culture, being responsive, all of those things. And so it's great to see that content is building up in the catalog and sharing. We're able to share it with other districts. So from a time, do we have any other questions, Damon, that we want to?
Yeah, I think
address?
there's another question here that I think is kind of good and touches on distance learning, certainly not just Alludo, but for the kids that are remote, for the kids that are distance and that are hesitating. Do you have some tips for bringing them in, increasing their engagement, making them feel more welcome, that sort of thing?
I can jump in really quick and just tell you 2 things that we did. So during the spring last year, when everybody was remote, our counselors in each of our 6 schools, they rotated every day with a lunch group where every day they would ask, kids would take a break at 11 and they would meet with these kids from 11 to 12 in a virtual meeting. And they would rotate that group every single day of the week. A lot of it was students they knew were possibly in distress or in trouble, that they would give a place for them to meet every single day with a group of peers. And so that was really helpful. And we had a lot of parent feedback on that, thanking us for doing that. The other thing our middle school did, which I thought was fantastic, we had a professional day on October 12th or whatever it was. And so they did their professional work in the morning. In the afternoon, they had I guess it was called a virtual street fair, essentially, that any student that was full virtual, was invited to come and be socially distanced outside the school at like an event that they held for those students. So they could come and be part of the community once again in this, in a safe outdoor environment. So that was really helpful. That was a big hit with the students who were fully virtual, which is for us about 16% of our population. So it's not a huge group, but still, that was a big success and really helped them remain part of the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got about 10 minutes or so left, and I wanted to allow you to share just a little bit of details about the program. So you've touched a lot on what you've built with Alludo, but Vanessa, what I'd love to have you share with the audience is kind of how you dreamed up this election day game. And you'd mentioned that, had been taught before and not always the easiest topic or one that teachers wanted to teach. So maybe share with us what your program's about that you built on Alludo, and then how is the rollout launch of it and how it's worked thus far compared to how maybe that's been delivered in prior years?
So part of what I do is I work with teachers to kind of, I don't want to say recreate their teaching style or their lessons, but essentially that's what I end up doing with them. So there's one teacher who last year, she never wanted to bother me. I was a co-teacher with her for years in another school, but same grade. And she asked me to do something, and I turned one of her, like in her words, boring document into something really fun and exciting. So over the summer, she reached out and she was like, so I've gotten together with the 5th grade teachers and I'm going to use you this year. Like this year, I've decided that like all bets are off. I can ask you to do things because I get it now. And I said, okay, so what is it? And she's like, none of us, not that we don't want to teach the election. Like we're never going to tell our administrators we don't want to teach the election. And of course I went running right to Patrick when this came up. But we don't want to teach it. This is like a scary topic for us to teach. And you have to understand, like our town is, as Patrick mentioned, it's very diverse in terms of socioeconomic. There's a lot of blue collar. There's a lot of, more business, driven people. It's just very mixed. And it's definitely like, you don't want to give off what you believe in terms of politics in this town as a teacher. And so I was like, all right. So I sat on it for a little while. I was like, I got you. Don't worry about it. And she would message me and I was like, listen, just tell me what are the bullets that you feel like you need to teach. I will build your game. I will build your thing. And didn't know it was a game at the time. And I was like, this is perfect. We had just got off the phone. Patrick had just wrapped up with you, Julia. And we're like, okay, we're going with a Ludo. And I'm like, this is it. So Patrick, we've got this idea. Let's go with it. And he's like, I'm on board. Let's do it together. So we took all the content that the teachers wanted to make sure they taught. And then we kind of went above and beyond to where we thought it should be. And I have to say, going back just a little bit, for us, this was really hard. So for anyone who's trying to build a game, it is a mindset like no other, but it comes really easily. So I have to tell you, so I started this idea and I spent hours making like editable PDF documents in Google and then making them backgrounds and then this whole project. And Julia's like, no, you need choice, Vanessa. That's the whole process behind this is you need choice. And I was like, I have choice. They could do this or they could do this. And she's like, no. And so, Patrick and I sat there and we had a lot of sidebar conversations of like, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And that's where we built in all like that kind of boring stuff that we made fun about, like indentations and doing all that like word processing stuff. But so what we did, we took the basics. You need to know that there are 3 branches of government. You need to go through the next step. So, okay, so there's 3 branches and what does each branch do? And what is the role? And then like Patrick would come in and be like, or like the top like 25 crazy things that happened in an election, or, someone like, give me a cool fact about this, like just different ways to kind of approach the topic that if you were in class, you might kind of diverge onto an off-topic conversation that's still on topic, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how it was built. And we did it, we rolled it out one level at a time. Like our missions within the level were correct. And then after the first week, we built we were in the process of building the second. So like the first was like your overview. And then your second level would have been, let's deep dive in. So now that there's 3 branches. So what does the legislative branch actually do? And what is the actual role of, the judicial branch? And where does that go in? And then our final level was getting to know the candidates, which of course is, you don't want to sway anyone anyway. So we just went to like the Scholastic News, where the kid reporters reported about each candidate. And I think like for us, it was very tricky because this is a hard topic to throw at our 5th graders, both because they're 5th graders and like, like electoral college, like what is that? But also because of the nature of the political environment right now. And so Patrick and I would talk and we'd be like, is this okay? Do we think this is clean? Like, are we swaying one way or the other? Because we're really trying to stay with like, these are the facts. And obviously if you built like a grammar game or something, you're not going to have this stress. And then we finally, the last activity now was my old school activity where they have to actually apply for a role in government. So now that they've done all these choices and they deep dove into different layers, now they have like an old school assignment where they have to like present who they are, why they should be in that role, and then, their 3-line essay. But I think this was a really interesting experience. And I think the teachers and the kids really bought into it and liked it. And like Patrick and I watched the kids finish. And I saw like a bunch of kids finish level 1 today. A couple were into level 2. But it gave them that excitement and that onus on their learning. And it's funny to watch because we had to sit and figure out the point values. and we had to figure out like, well, this is like a mindless activity, you know, take a screenshot, like, or, you know, how to put bullets in a Word doc and then transfer that skill of bullets into a slide deck. Like, how do you do that? And we watched some kids do like all the non-required activities because they were lots more for like less points. And then you watch other kids just do the big required ones. And then if you go back, like I've watched a couple of kids I've been kind of tracking, they went back because they wanted to like beat the other kid. You know, like it's really
It's always a strategy, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm like, this kid didn't do anything, but we asked them to do it. So it was very cool to kind of watch that whole experience unfold, and for the kids too. And I am personally very curious to see what like the end is. And I think part of it too is like that teacher mindset. Like I did throw in that like end unit project kind of activity, like a closing activity, because you're not going to necessarily assess them on like, did they read about, you know, Trump versus Biden? You know, like we put that in there, but you're not going to assess them on that. But it's funny because our teachers reached out to us, a few of them, maybe last week, I want to say, and they were like, so what's the final project for this? Like, where does this go? And we're like, no, we got it. Like, we're actually going to throw it a final project. But I do think that, you know, the whole experience for them definitely makes them want more. I think both kids and teachers. I know our teachers were like, well, we're going to beat that school. Like, come on, kids, you got to like, because we're 5 elementary schools battling against this game, right?
Right.
They all want to build up their stamina and their points, and you know, you just see it. And I think that, you know, this kind of ties into like one of the questions earlier about like, how do you bring your virtual kids in? Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in person. You don't have to do this at school. You can do it at home. You can do it on the weekend. Like, you're not saying you have to sit here for 20 minutes and just do it. You know, and there was one teacher I spoke with, and she actually said to me that one of her kids wasn't doing some of the extra things like the formatting, but that either a sibling or a parent, I forget, but brought up about like, how do you do something? And the kid's like, oh, I can do it. And like went to one of the not required activities that said like, here's how you bold a text, or, you know, whatever it was. And like they learned, and they had that like onus of themselves to kind of boost their own morale and stamina through it.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's
awesome.
been really interesting. And you know, we have a couple other games that we want to start doing, and I think that it's going to be really well received.
That's really cool to hear. You know, it's going back a few years when we started working with adult learners. One of the things that wasn't necessarily deliberate in design, but was feedback that we received from adult learners was, thanks so much for providing me an environment where I could fail safely. Like, I don't feel like I'm exposed in front of a classroom of 20 or 30 other people, and I have an opportunity to try this out at my own pace and experiment with it. And I loved hearing that, because it does, it boosts their confidence, and kind of removes some of those insecurities that they might have had in certain topic areas coming into it, when they can get it done and then go, yay, and of course, badges and points. So,
Yeah.
so Jay, you've been using the Alludo platform for quite a bit longer on the student side. And what I love is, so what Patrick and Vanessa have done is they've built this awesome program for their 5th grade classes and rolled it out, and the teachers have been brought into it. Whereas you're coming from a different perspective. You have district-wide initiatives, but your teachers are also like, all right, how do I do this myself, build my own adventure within potentially my own classroom or across grades. So talk about what you're doing.
Yeah. So last year we made the decision that we were going to start doing digital citizenship for students through Alludo, which meant we were adding all of the students to Alludo, which made teachers who've been asking for that for a while very excited, because then they could start building out their own games. So last year we had one school that built a freshman game, and then and then another school that did their 3 academies game, or started the first year of that 4-year game for freshmen. And then we were going to roll out our district-wide digital citizenship game, but then COVID and things changed. So we switched that up a little bit, but then our plan to roll it out for this year My initial thought was to roll it out at the beginning of the year, but then we had all of these schools that jumped on with their own freshman games, as I mentioned before. So we didn't want to overwhelm students and confuse it with all these different games. So we've pushed it back a little bit, but starting later this year, I think we're going to roll it out now in January. We're going to have a district-wide game. It's called Smarter Things. So play on Stranger Things. It's got that fun theme to it. And so we will have we'll do it by class of, so we'll have a game for all of each class, starting each year, starting fresh in a game. That'll be across the district. So for those competitive ones, they can compete by school. But we're going to have, the main focus of it is digital citizenship. That's something that we have to do every year. We're required to do these, digital citizenship lessons. But then in addition to that, we're going to have 2 other missions, which are focused on tech. So just optional things that students, if they don't know how to take a screenshot or make it bold or, do the formatting or ALA format or whatever, we can put that kind of stuff in there to help them with the tech side of things, which is something that teachers have been asking for, especially in distance learning. Like, I can't teach them all these things. I'm learning it myself. So that'll be really handy. And then we're going to have just sort of a general life skills. So it will have some things like, applying for the FAFSA, getting financial aid type of things related to college, related to careers. But then in addition to that, like you're learning about your credit score or just things that will be helpful to know moving forward. So we're going to sort of chunk it year by year. What are the types of things that we want that might be helpful for freshmen moving up all the way to seniors. I saw also there was a question earlier about the badges. For teachers, we have digital badges for most things, but then we purchase stickers for the level badges. So that's kind of a fun thing that also adds to the whole community, because you see on their laptops, they have their stickers of, the badges they've earned. Same for the students. We got stickers for one just for joining the game. So sort of the generic Smarter Things logo. That'll be fun to see around the district when we get to go back into classrooms and visit. But then we'll also have level badges, level stickers that the students will get. So I think it just sort of adds again to sort of that community and, see them around and see the different badges they've earned. So people will do a lot for a little sticker.
They do a lot for a little sticker, and you have awesome stickers for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Any other questions we want to answer from the audience, Damon?
No, I think our guests here have just done a wonderful job of answering questions and taking away the job that I had to do. So I appreciate all 3 of you for doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's been great. I'm very excited by all of the ideas and the contribution that you're making. We've alluded to this notion of a catalog and sharing content. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with Alludo, I think one of the best features that we have is that as educators are building out programs for their students and for their teachers, they can opt in to share a lot of that content, all of that content that they want with other educators. And so in addition to Patrick and Vanessa's election game, I know they've got a ton of other ideas and things that they're thinking about, a grammar game and others. Jay has his Smarter Things game he's going to be rolling out in January. We are working with some other districts right now that are launching in the next week, iPad training device games for their students and MacBook training for their students and advisory period type training. So back to what we talked about earlier, the teachers are doing all these other things, and if they can do some training and some instruction with a tool like Alludo or others, that it's been really helpful. So just a little bit of information there. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been an awesome conversation, and we're looking forward to seeing what you're going to do next.